Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Unlock Life. This is Jennifer here. So, I wanted to talk to you guys about emotions, like I said, and this is a whole series about emotions. And today I'm going to introduce the concept of what almost, it's now a well known sort of philosophy, but it's sort of my take on what emotions and how it actually integrates into our lives. So, for starters, you need to realize emotions are part of a package. We often see it as one off things, as a reaction or something of that sort, but it isn't, right? Um, in the way I see it is it's four components. The first part is your subconscious inner psyche. Okay, so that's what I guess those are the things that you have experienced and incorporated and almost locked into the subconscious side. And then there's this conscious mind of, logic and thought and everything that we actually process and use on a regular basis. But mind you, it's actually your subconscious that controls how you feel and how you think. So what happens is there's also an emotional side that gets triggered by the subconscious to sort of give you information. And lastly, of course, it actually integrates with the body itself because with any emotion, we know it triggers a body physical reaction. So if you're getting angry, you may turn red, your blood boils, as they say. Or you get sort of uptight, or if there's like fear, there's adrenaline rush. So some sort of physical reaction is then tied to your emotions. So emotions are not so sort of one off on its own. And that's why it actually shouldn't be sort of neglected or detached from everything that we think is. So how I would sort of phrase it is, if you look at it, subconscious is what is sort of the initial starter. So when you encounter a situation, say you're faced with a cheetah, uh, your subconscious tells you, holy crap, this is life threatening. So you should be afraid. Um, and then it triggers the emotion of fear. And so fear then triggers your physical body to say, produce more adrenaline so you can run or do something. But heighten your senses so you can actually do something about it or do something or react to this emotion of fear. Um, and lastly, your mind then registers everything and understands, okay, I should be afraid. I need to run. So I'm going to do something. At some point, you make a decision on what you're going to do. But this is sort of the progression of how emotion works. It's subconscious to the emotion, to the body, and then to the mind. Um, but what we sort of in modern day have learned to do is omit or ignore emotions even when it tells us things. And that's very very dangerous because then you start losing touch and your body starts feeling off because, well, your mind overwrites things. So what happens, say for example, is in a stressful work relationship or a work sort of scenario, um, your subconscious triggers something and says, "I'm stressed out. You need to do something. I'm stressed out." So the emotion of stress gets triggered, and your body sort of tightens up, and cortisol levels and everything rises and all that stuff. And that's the physical reaction that you get. Uh, but when we go to the mind, it's not necessarily fight or flight situation, nor is it something necessarily you can escape. So you would say, just forget about it. Just forget about it. It'll go away. Just forget about it. And then you sort of stuff it back in. So your body is still stressed out at the same time. Your emotions at that point, you say, forget about it. So you stuff it back to where it came from. So it goes back into the subconscious. which is really, really bad because what happens is it doesn't go away, it just sort of adds up and amplifies. Um, so when you do that and your emotions don't get acknowledged and processed properly, it goes back in the psyche, and then it comes out again next time, uh, twice as much or something like that. And what's happening then is you sort of starts accumulating. So have you ever met those people that are very composed? They never get angry. They're always, always, always good. Um, Most of the time, you can tell they're holding it back in. It's not that they're actually okay. You can tell they're holding it down. Those are the people you have to watch out for because at some point, it will overflow, the emotion will overflow, and they will somehow snap. So it depends on the tolerance, and we know, like, you can keep building up the tolerance. So you try and not hit that snapping point. But in all reality is they're building it up to some point. And if something really, really, really bad happens, it may actually just trigger it. And then you get some sort of massive explosion of some sort, um, from the person, and you'll be like, whoa, where did that come from? Well, it came from all the things they've suppressed and they never bothered or wanted to address. So you have to realize your emotions are here to tell you a message. Whichever emotion it is, it doesn't matter. They're here to tell you something about yourself, something about the state that you're in, and something about um, just just what you're feeling or what you're actually experiencing from a most minimal sort of animalistic level. And for us, we know human beings pride ourselves to be more higher conscious or higher or self-aware because of the higher consciousness that we have. Um, but what often is forgotten is that we are animals first and foremost. So your emotions are based in those. And for you to be in a higher level of consciousness, it's actually to work with your emotions. That's when you're actually in a higher level of consciousness. It's not to say, I'm just going to control and suppress and numb out or whatever it is that you do, or want to do with your emotions and anything but sort of trying to acknowledge and process it. Because that's what we do in modern day. We forget and we ignore and we every now and then blow up and let go of it and sort of just, have that one sort of big thing. But this is why it doesn't need to be that, and it shouldn't actually be that on a regular basis, because you are constantly in flow. So if you look at the root of emotions, the root word comes from Latin. It's emotera and emovere, which refers to move outwards and to be in motion. So it's got a very water-like quality to it. And so you have to see your emotions as something that's almost like water, where you take a jug of water, you start pouring into it, it starts filling up. At some point, it'll overflow if you don't actually pour out the jug. So what we do when we're trying to process these emotions is we're actually pouring out the jug so that it never actually at any point just overflows and sort of gets really messy. When you're pouring it out, it's directed, it's very streamed, and it's very purposeful. So you know exactly where it's going. It's not going to get messy. It's not going to go all over the counter or something. But if you just let it accumulate and you it starts overflowing everywhere, it's going to get messy. What we've learned to do is keep switching it out for a bigger jug. So somehow we go from a small 1 liter to 2 liters to 3 liters and so on and so forth. But at some point you're going to reach a limit. So this is why I don't recommend doing that. I mean, yes, it's part of emotional development of having that higher tolerance, but at the same time, um, it's not the answer to having just higher tolerance. You really do need to actually learn to process, acknowledge, and sort of flow your emotions through so that it doesn't overflow in any way and sort of hurt the people around you or have sort of impacts on your relationships or anything of that sort or even on yourself. Because here's the thing, a lot of illnesses comes from this bottling of emotions. So it's almost like it's in some ways it's toxic to keep all this water in the jug. You want to keep the jug as empty as possible because then you're sort of in this constant flow of things and nothing is trapped. But at the point of you keeping it in a jug and just sort of holding it there, think about it. It becomes, contaminated. There's staleness. There's just imagine, a water fountain that never gets cleaned out. It gets pretty disgusting. So imagine that in your body. That's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. It's not a healthy thing. And this is why I say emotions. We tend to look at emotions in a different way of saying, it's, just not deal with it, or it's bad. But it's actually not bad. It tells you a lot of information about yourself, about how you feel, and how you actually understand the situation subconsciously. It's almost your subconscious way of trying to tell you something. And by not understanding that and sort of just overriding it and ignoring it, your subconscious not too happy either. And it'll keep escalating ways of getting your attention. And that's why you have different emotional states, is because when one thing doesn't work, it escalates into another. So if you go into anger, there's rage afterwards because, well, I tried being angry or sending you the information of being angry, but you're not listening. So what do? I amp it up and try and get your attention more. And that's what happens. And at some point, it probably manifests into some sort of physical thing where it's like, you cannot ignore it anymore. So this is where you have to actually start listening to your emotions. And you can draw a lot of strength from it too, because when you understand what's happening to you, you can sort of live the life that you actually want to live and not sort of what's placed onto you. So I understand, like, it's, for me, the higher consciousness of emotions is not to ignore them, is not to sort of stuff them in a box and say I don't need them. It's to actually understand what the emotions are trying to tell you and work with it from a conscious level. And that takes a lot of effort, because you have a lot of people that are very emotional, and they're emotional in the sense of, well, they don't really understand or control their emotions. They're just in the sort of flow of things where they don't actually have conscious knowledge of what's going on necessarily. They don't know why they feel a certain way or why it's happening. They just feel it. That's not good either, because you're being sort of taken over by emotions, and you need to understand there's a balance between your emotions and your conscious mind. So when you have an emotion, what you need to do is evaluate, what does that actually mean? What is it trying to tell me? So often say if you're getting angry at something, it's because some sort of boundary has been violated in your space or in your sort of life when you're interacting with somebody else. Like that's an example of it. But it's like when that happens, your emotion gets triggered up to say, I'm angry because I'm violated. I don't want to be violated. And the idea of violation is not necessarily they did anything to you, but it's more so there are certain autonomous decisions that may be yours, but people are trying to push you a certain way, or they are trying to manipulate you, or something. They're trying to do something to you where it's not their place, and that's where the boundary comes in. And if your boundary is strong, your emotions are going to trigger up and say, I'm angry. This is not happening. You do not get to control my life. My life is my life. And that's the boundary. And the anger part is to push people outside and push back on the things that you need to because it's yours and not theirs. But what happens, particularly in my own experience, is I've let down, like I understand the boundaries, but I've let it down completely. And this way my subconscious keeps telling me, you should be angry. This is not right. You should be angry. But I keep suppressing the anger, so it's like a vicious cycle. And at some point I never actually get angry, and I actually become very, very dissociated, detached from anger itself, because it's the only way I can actually control it. But that's not healthy, because there are certain boundaries that you need to have from somebody else. And anger is the separation between where that line needs to be in some ways. And for you to for me, it took me a while to understand, okay, first of all, I feel angry, and I should be feeling angry. It took me a while to understand why that anger exists, because you have to actually trace it back to, okay, what is actually happening that's triggering the anger, that's triggering my sense of violated boundaries of some sort. So this is where the conscious mind comes in. It's not just about, oh, I feel anger, oh, I'm gonna lash out at you. No, that doesn't work that way. You're not supposed to. It's meant to tell you a message. It's not meant for you to react in terms of necessarily pushing it onto somebody else, because that's what happens when people react to anger. It's, I'm gonna become angry at you, and I'm gonna sort of lash out and scream and yell and do all this stuff. But if you're truly in a conscious state and feeling those emotions you're feeling, you'll understand, I'm angry, and understand, okay, so something is not right here. What's not right? And you go through that process of asking yourself and talking to yourself, where saying, okay, so what's not right here? Something I know is off, but I'm not sure what it is. So you start asking yourself, okay, is it because of this? Is it because of that? And at some point you'll hit an answer. It's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's it. You know, this is the problem. And then you look at the problem and you look at, okay, what does that actually do? What do I actually need to change to not be angry, to not have a reaction? Because that's what you really, really need to do from a conscious state, to actually understand the situation and to understand how you can change the situation. Because if you take out the source of anger, you can forgive the anger and turn that energy into something else. You don't need to lash out at people to be able to express yourself. And that's the true emotional intelligence that we lack nowadays, because we usually just either express the emotion outwards, or we don't fully understand why we have the emotions, both of which are very dangerous in my opinion. So yes, what I want to help you guys understand in this first sort of video is really that there's a connection between your subconscious to your emotions, to your body, and then lastly to your consciousness or your mind. Because this dream is generally how we function. It's generally how we process. And so when you take out, say, something like emotions, and you sort of numb it out or something, you become detached from your subconscious altogether. You don't really understand what's going on, but the problem is your body still feels it. So it still has an impact on your life. And this is why a lot of people get stressed out or anxiety. It's because, well, they've stuffed their emotion away, but physically they still feel all the effects and amplified too because they've stuffed it away. And in that amplification, that's why the whole body, the reactions of anxiety attacks, panic attacks, or anything of that sort comes in. It's because you're not fully acknowledging these emotions, nor are you trying to work with them. Now, they get a lot more complicated than this because how your subconscious is programmed usually comes from your past experiences, and often when you're developing or as a child, which means a lot of the root causes of these things come from your past. And this is why you need to, emotion is a really big mess in some ways. Because in order for you to process certain things in the present, you need to actually have a conscious awareness of what happened, of what's triggering, and of how you can actually change it. And all of that takes a lot of self-awareness. Because it takes the awareness of, well, the current situation of what's happening. So why is it that I'm having certain emotional reactions? Why is it that I feel certain ways? And what's triggering it? That's the current situation. But then it's to look back and say, okay, what is the root of it? Because say if I'm afraid of dogs, for example, if I'm afraid of dogs, when I see a dog, I'm gonna have a fear reaction because I'm afraid. But why am I afraid of dogs? Most people aren't afraid of dogs when they're growing up. So a lot of times, what you realize is there were certain experiences that created that fear or created that reaction to the fear, or reaction to the situation that creates the fear. So, say for example, if I'm afraid of dogs, there's a possibility, and it's not always the case, but there's a possibility I probably had some sort of bad experience with a dog, or I've seen something that's anchored into my subconscious, where when I actually encounter a dog, I experience fear rather than happiness for a lot of people. So these are things that you actually need to start looking at. It's not just what's happening in this present, because in the present, yes, it's the fear. But what's causing the fear, what's the root cause of fear, is actually the experience, probably back when you're younger or whatever. And so when you understand the experience, you can start breaking it down and say, okay, does this actually make sense? Can I let go of this experience and actually acknowledge that there is nothing to fear about dogs? It's just more so I had one bad experience. And you sort of, that all this is conscious effort. So this is where humans are different from animals, because we have the ability to consciously understand these things in the past and change these past experiences. But in animal sense, most of the time they just have it programmed into them that they can't change it necessarily, or they need some sort of outside force to change it. But for us humans, we can actually go through the conscious effort and understand and reshape our mind. And when you reshape and say, if I can understand that, okay, these are the root causes, not all dogs are bad, and you sort of reprogram your mind that way, your subconscious then doesn't necessarily react when it sees a dog next time, because they'll say, okay, I understand, I had a bad experience, but it's not all dogs, it's not all of that, so I'm willing to just see. I'll be more cautious about it, but I'm willing to let go of the complete fear factor at that point. And when you're able to sort of have that conversation with your subconscious, and it takes a lot of practice because, well, your conscious mind and your subconscious mind don't usually meet. So yeah, this is where meditation comes in. Because meditation is this sort of bridge in some ways between your consciousness and your subconsciousness. And when you're able to meditate and sort of see things in your subconscious mind in a certain way, then it'll change the perspective, which will change the emotional reaction and everything that follows afterwards. So this is why I say your emotions shouldn't be it shouldn't be separate from your conscious mind, because they need to work hand in hand for you to fully understand what it is that you need, what is it that you want, and what is it that is not right at the moment, because it will tell you everything that you need to know. And it's just figuring out how to unlock all of that takes a lot of time. But the rewarding factor is when you're able to do that, you're able to live in this, how should I say, you're able to live in a way that's true to yourself. So I don't need to necessarily follow somebody else's value, because I know what's mine. I know what makes me happy. I know what brings me joy. And all of that is an understanding of your emotions, because whenever you're doing something and you're getting a lot of joy out of it, it's telling you should probably do that. And I mean, yes, I know there's like sort of narcotics or whatever that can make you feel good, but in all reality of things, consciously and subconsciously, you know if that's good for you or not. You know that we all know that drugs are not good for us. And so it may make me feel good in the moment, but ultimately I know it's not good. So you almost have to trust in this sort of inner wisdom that comes from your psyche and comes from your subconscious, because it knows what you need and what you don't need. And if you're willing to listen to it, like I said, you can live a life that's true to yourself and not necessarily in line with what everybody else expects or needs or wants or whatever. So yeah, I know this is a long video, but it's sort of like an introduction to how your emotions are sort of works with the rest of your mind, and where that process lies. And so yeah, I hope you guys like it. Definitely leave me a comment about what you guys think. I know there's a lot of people who say, oh, emotional intelligence, whatever, and there's a lot of things. But I can guarantee you most of them haven't gone through the process of actually doing this and understanding what this actually means to their lives. And most of the people who usually say that, I've found, and may not be all the case, just mind you, it just, at least in my experience, what I've found, is most of them, they're either afraid of their emotions or they've never actually tried to deal with their emotions either. So it's much easier to say become dissociated and become numb, because I've been there too. And trust me, when you don't know how to cope, it is much easier. It is probably the easiest thing you can do. But I am also telling you that when you do that, you become almost like a walking zombie. Because as much as consciousness, as much as theory, as much as reason you can have, you're detached from yourself. You're not being human at that point. You're just being, a thought form in some ways. And that's not, to me, at least to me, that's not being human. Being human is sort of understanding all aspects of your life and of yourself, of your mind, of everything. And when you're shutting down an aspect, that's already saying something of saying you're not really fully embracing who you are as a person. And so, yeah, this is why I really believe in this whole sort of wholeness of both emotional intelligence and intellectual intelligence, and using both to work together to sort of be you, whatever that means. And I hope that you guys can take something out of this and sort of start looking at your own emotions, start looking at what's causing it, what exactly are you feeling, and understanding all of that, because that will help you sort of move towards a more balanced life, and in some ways more fulfilling, because you'll know exactly what's good, what's meaningful to you, versus what's somebody else's wants and somebody else's values. You'll know exactly when that happens. So yeah, definitely hope you guys like it. Leave me a comment. I really want to hear what you guys think. Because this is, it's not really talked about, so I want to hear what people think about this. All right, cool. Thank you. I'll see you guys next time.